Tango Audio.
If you enjoy the stories on this podcast, you'll also like the stories in my book, Filmmaking Confidential, which isn't just for filmmakers, but also all artists and really any entrepreneur. Now an Amazon.com and Audible.com bestseller. I just want to say thank you to all of you who ordered it. If you haven't yet picked it up, it's available wherever books are sold in most countries around the world. To find out more, check out filmmakingconfidential.com and stevebalderson.com, and thank you. I'm Steve Balderson, and you're listening to the Filmmaking Confidential podcast. Every week we meet with filmmakers, writers, actors, artists, and other notables. Today, I'll continue reading from my book, Filmmaking Confidential. Distribution Middlemen. A lot of filmmakers are confused about the realities of distribution, and rightly so. I've been making and selling movies internationally for over a decade, and I'm still learning about all the secrets and tricks the industry hides from us. Part of the problem is that no one shares this information with each other, both the good and bad, so I'm making it my mission to do so, openly, honestly, and hopefully clearly. When your film is ready for release, there are a variety of ways to get it out into the world. There are aggregators and sales reps, producers reps, and distributors, foreign sales agents, and a variety of middlemen who can help you. First, we'll explore just one of those ways, the sales agent. Sales agents are people who represent dozens, if not hundreds, of movie titles. They take these films to markets such as Cannes, Berlin, and Toronto. Film markets are not to be confused with film festivals, which sometimes happen simultaneously and in conjunction to film markets. While attending these markets, they rent a booth or a space, such as a hotel room, and invite buyers from different distribution companies from all over the world to stop by their booth and check out their titles. Sometimes the sales agent will aggressively track down certain buyers from different countries with promotional flyers about your film. Years before they made Sharknado, The Asylum was the first sales agent I worked with, and they were downright brilliant. They are incredibly nice people, they paid their bills, they were actively in touch with us, and sharing with us ways they were selling Pep Squad. They managed to sell my movie all over the globe. Australia, New Zealand, France, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, Italy, Scandinavia, South Africa, South Korea, the UK, China, Greece, the Baltic states, Indonesia, the Middle East, Portugal, Thailand, and Turkey. Oh, and even Canada. I can't tell you how sad, devastated, I was the day I learned The Asylum wouldn't be actively selling other people's movies anymore. Finding a new sales agent to replace The Asylum was a bit like being dumped by the love of your life and having to quickly find a new soulmate or risk perishing into the depths of hell forever. In the process of finding the good guys, I worked with a variety of scumbag sales agents selling several of my movies, and I've encountered many that were so full of themselves and so rude that I ended up not hiring them. First, remember that you are hiring a sales agent. They aren't hiring you. Their egos are sometimes a problem. To keep their egos well fed, they will often treat you badly so you think you need them. When in all honesty, to keep in business, they need you. If they don't have your film on their roster, they'll have to find someone else's film. They cannot afford to remain in business if they aren't selling as many movies as they can. The second lesson is to beware of sales agents' so-called marketing expenses. I've been to Cannes. I know for a fact it doesn't cost several $100,000 to be there. Most sales agents will pad their marketing expenses so they can fly first class, put themselves up at the Carlton or Hotel du Cap, well over $1,000 a night, and dine at the inn places with tasting menus featuring 20 courses, wine pairings, and more. Yes, that's what they spend their money on. Or your money, rather. They don't use it to sell your movie. They think they should be treated like royalty and will try to convince you as much. Sales agents will sometimes pay you in advance when they acquire your movie, but then, as they sell it to different buyers, they keep all the money that comes in until they recoup their marketing expenses. Unless you've read the fine print and capped their expenses, you may never see another cent beyond the advance. I prefer not getting an advance in exchange for the sales agent taking a commission on all sales and giving me my shares from the first dollars in. When you're signing an agreement with a sales agent, be sure to discuss this aspect openly. A client once asked me, "Is there a set fee or a range that filmmakers can expect to pay sales agents?" I once considered joining a distribution co-op that consists of a group of filmmakers collectively promoting a catalog of films to buyers. Their fee at the time was $2,000. I replied, in all caps, "Warning. There is no fee for a sales agent. I'm not sure what kind of co-op you were thinking about joining, but that sounds fishy to me. I've never paid a sales agent. I don't know anyone who has paid any kind of fee to a sales agent. Sales agents pay you. I'm automatically skeptical of anyone asking for money to help sell your film. However, if the co-op you were talking to was asking $2,000 to cover expenses related to releasing your film straight to consumers and skipping the sales agent route, there might be something to that, but I'm not sure what. Say your sales agent, let's call him Bill, wants to take on your movie, and he says, "I loved Acts 2 and 3. They were so great I cried, but Act 1 is boring." Remember to ask yourself, what does that communicate to me about Bill? Did he watch the film late at night? Early on a Saturday morning? Was he drunk or hungover? Was he tired? Was he awake? Was he hungry? Did he feel Act 1 was boring because he didn't yet realize the tone of the movie? Was it because he hadn't seen the press kit? Or perhaps it was because he simply didn't care about character development and wanted it to start with a bang? Any of those situations are plausible. Bill probably doesn't understand that one of the reasons he loved Acts 2 and 3 so much was because of Act 1. If one starts watching a movie in Act 2, there is no kind of care for the characters and no emotional connection to them. Perhaps Bill is incapable of getting to know someone, which would suggest that he probably jumps right into sex without even going on a date to test out the chemistry first. You do not need Bill's advice on how to make a movie, though he will disagree. You need his advice on how to find the right buyer and get into the right festivals. Remember that. Always remember to stay on topic when people like Bill offer feedback by saying, "That's something to consider." It puts the topic to rest and allows the rest of the conversation to continue. Another kind of middleman is the producer's rep. A producer's rep is a person who acts as a negotiator for your film, and his or her sole purpose is to get your film sold to a sales agent, aggregator, or distributor. They will hold private screenings. You'll pay for it, naturally. They'll send out postcards or other materials. You'll pay for those too. And they'll do a bunch of other stuff, some useless. You'll need to reimburse them for as well. Sometimes they'll do things that don't require reimbursement, such as talk to people on the telephone. Eventually, when they make a sale, they will take a percentage of that sale as commission. There are many people out there who call themselves producers' reps. Some of them are failed industry executives. Some are failed filmmakers. A few are attorneys, and only a couple actually know what they're doing. All of them claim to know everyone in the business, and most of them will require a retainer before actively taking on your film. Those are the kinds of producers' reps to avoid. Instead, find one who works solely on commission. Those kinds of producers' reps are very rare, But they will try harder to actually sell your movie. Producers' reps that have already been paid a retainer of, say, $5,000 don't really have an ambition to make a good sale since they've already made some money. The first producer's rep we hired was a disaster. We'd stupidly paid him a retainer, not knowing we could otherwise have found someone who would take commission. And he just didn't have the ambition to get the job done. The longer he didn't sell the film and the longer we paid him, the more reason he had to not sell it. We believed everything he told us, which was naive, I know, but he had been a former VP of acquisitions at a major studio. So why wouldn't we believe him? The thing about producers' reps is that they aren't willing to do anything that rocks their boat. If they were too aggressive, their relationship with studio head X, or whomever, would be damaged. So they aren't going to be an aggressive salesman. They'll pussyfoot around delicately so they can always look good in the eyes of the buyers they have relationships with. Like most people in the industry, producers' reps will act as though you work for them. They will somehow totally deny the fact they are, in reality, working for you. Once I asked our producer's rep to share with me his contact list, mailing addresses, etc., of buyers at each company. This information is publicly available. It isn't secret. You can make a telephone call to every distributor and ask the front desk, who is the name of the acquisitions personnel? And they will tell you. It's easy. But it takes time to call them all. Maybe not days and days, but I wanted to save time, so I just asked our producer's rep for his list. He was flabbergasted. He flew through the roof. How dare I ask him such a thing? He said, "It's my livelihood. I can't share that with you." I informed him that anyone can make that list, that it was just going to save me some time. But he was the wise and experienced one, and I was some filmmaker from Kansas. What did I know? Of course, he didn't take me seriously and share his list. So, I did the research on my own. It took a couple days, but in the end, I'd gathered the data and had my list. When I told him I had my own list, he actually asked me to share it with him so he could make sure his was up to date. Was he kidding? I think that was the last time I spoke with him. A few weeks later, we sold the film. Perhaps he helped, or perhaps it was my list and the marketing strategies I did on my own, without his help, that ended up selling our film. Who knows? I haven't used a producer's rep since that first experience. And I continue to sell movies without using one, so I'm not sure there's any reason to hire one. But if you do, be aware, and beware. Lastly, we have the distributors and the aggregators. A distributor is a person, or company, that takes your movie and gets it out to retailers like Redbox, Netflix, Amazon, iTunes, cable and satellite, on-demand, and other VOD platforms. Aggregators are the people, or companies, who distributors use to assist them. Filmmakers have caught on, and now more and more are approaching aggregators directly instead of using a distributor. And it makes sense. Aggregators will keep their commissions and marketing expenses before paying dues to the distributor, who in turn will keep their commissions and marketing expenses before paying their dues to you, or before paying their dues to your sales agent, who in turn will deduct their commissions and marketing expenses before paying you. So why not cut out all the middlemen and hire an aggregator from the get-go? It isn't that easy. In fact, it becomes even more complicated. If it were easy for filmmakers to get their films to an aggregator directly, half the industry would be out of a job. Distributors would become obsolete. This will be the eventual outcome, but in the meantime, distributors everywhere are trying to hold on to their jobs. So, naturally, distributors are making it appealing, financially or otherwise, for aggregators to work with them instead of you and me. Today, aggregators aren't set up for one-on-one relationships with filmmakers. As technology advances and makes it possible for more films to be made, the strain will continue to weigh on aggregators who don't morph their company structures to suit. Any musician can post their music to iTunes and sell directly to their fan base. As of today, iTunes is not open for any filmmaker to upload their movies. Right now, filmmakers must use a Netflix-approved aggregator in order to get their movies on Netflix. My hunch is that the moment Netflix opens its doors to filmmakers directly, as iTunes did with musicians directly, that is the end of the distributor and potentially the end of the aggregator. If aggregators are to survive, they'll need to morph into a kind of distributor, which essentially brings an entirely new dilemma. Then there are the aggregators out there who will take on any project, no matter what it is, for a fee. I make movies for my audiences. I do not make them to appeal to industry executives, distributors, or aggregators. And I'm not going to waste money paying an aggregator to do something today I'll be able to do without them tomorrow. If an aggregator or distributor tells you there isn't a market for one of your films because they didn't get it, ignore them. Get your movie out there any way you can. There are VOD platforms you can get on besides Netflix. And when the day comes these VOD platforms are open to filmmakers directly, you won't need to worry about an aggregator or distributor ever again. You'll be able to provide your product directly to your audience, just like the music industry. Our fan bases and audiences around the world do not care who releases our movies or what companies have been involved in getting our movies to their desktop, TV, or iPhone. Our audiences just care that they can watch whatever they wish in whatever form they want. An excerpt from my book, Filmmaking Confidential. One of my favorite guests from Season 1 is a visit with The Asylum.
It exploded because big celebrities like Patton Oswalt or Mia Farrow and these other quirky, weird people started tweeting, I'm watching a crazy movie, what the hell's going on? What the hell is Sharknado? And then that started snowballing to everyone else talking about it at the same time.
You can hear my full interview with The Asylum at filmmakingconfidential.com or by subscribing for free to this podcast. Coming up, I'll read another chapter from Filmmaking Confidential right after this. I'm Steve Balderson, and this is the Filmmaking Confidential podcast. I'm back with a special bonus episode reading chapters from my book, Filmmaking Confidential. You don't need to yell. I was on a film shoot recently where I wasn't producing or directing, just a fly on the wall. It was really a great experience to observe the daily dynamics of a film set that wasn't my own. I highly encourage anyone who is interested in making movies to visit someone else's set. Whether you are an actor, director, DP, makeup artist, costumer, writer, etc., it's an incredibly educational experience. No matter if you're a pro or a total newbie. And it doesn't matter what kind of movie it is. The first film set I visited, which wasn't my own, was Sean Penn's The Crossing Guard, starring Jack Nicholson. The second film set I visited was a no-budget indie shoot for a first-time director. Each was on the farthest and most opposite ends of the filmmaking spectrum. One had over 100 crew people, endless trucks lining the street, a buffet of craft service that rivaled the best restaurants, while the other had none of that and just a handful of aspiring production assistants. It didn't matter, though, because both had interesting dynamics to study and learn from. This is why I suggest getting yourself on any film set, anywhere, and just take it all in. Compare how different directors work and how different types of actors work, and do it as many times as you can. It will help you better define how you'd like to operate your own film set. In all the differences, there was one thing I remembered that I'd totally forgotten about. I forgot because I haven't used one in years. The traditional AD, either a first or second assistant director. Because I schedule everything ahead of time and manage all the administrative aspects of my shoots, I haven't needed one. I do realize that not everyone is as hyper-organized as me, so you might need an AD or two. And when you interview them, my advice is to keep an eye, ear open to how they communicate. I've never been in a How to Be an AD workshop, but something about how most of them behave suggests that they have learned to be stern, mean-mannered, loud-mouthed, and generally petulant or irritating. It is so totally counterproductive to behave that way in a job position like that of the first or second AD. I understand it is important to stay on schedule, but there's no reason to yell about it and to push people around like a drill sergeant. All that does is make people disrespect you. Getting what you want is the goal, right? There are two ways to accomplish that: the respectful way and the disrespectful way. Try this exercise. Ask someone, in a soft and friendly tone of voice, "Could you pass the ketchup?" Chances are, the other person will likely not think twice and just pass it. Now, try it on another person and use a firm drill sergeant voice and demand, "Give that to me. Come on!" You might end up getting the ketchup, but that person won't like the experience of passing it to you. And afterwards, they will likely hold some resentment for being treated like an inferior person. And if they are continued to be treated that way, those tiny resentments will build up until they become so big that person will leave the set each night and never want to work with you again. ADs who have been programmed to behave like Nazis will disagree with me, of course, but never mind them. The easiest way to get what you want is to figure out how to avoid conflicts from the beginning. If you schedule correctly before you start shooting, you won't need to worry about staying on schedule. If you communicate with your makeup artist clearly, you'll already know how much time each person will take and you can plan for it. If you use archaic ways of scheduling a shoot just because everybody else does, or "that's the way it's always been done," you'll have an outcome just like everybody else, over budget, behind schedule, etc. But if you really take everything into consideration from the get-go, you can plan for it all. Then I suppose you won't need a professional AD. You could just use an intern who knows how to communicate with people in a clear and respectful way. What festival premieres mean. One of my consulting clients recently asked me to help her clarify the difference between the various types of film festival premieres in order to help her analyze her film festival strategy. She asked, what are world premieres as compared to, say, regional and/or local premieres? More specifically, can I have a local premiere or a U.S. premiere before the world premiere, or is there a specific one that is supposed to happen first? Filmmakers and the media throw the word premiere around so often in the film world, I understand how it can sometimes be confusing. We're not talking about the red carpet premieres that a major studio might have in London, New York, or Los Angeles that have nothing to do with a film festival. Those types of premieres are usually held for publicity purposes to kick off a global theatrical release. At film festivals, when you have a world premiere, that means it's the first time your movie will screen publicly in the world. Some film festivals only accept films with world premiere status, such as Sundance. If you have already screened at another festival prior, you could be disqualified from participation. Some film festivals do not require a world premiere status. It's important to know their rules before you submit your movie. I advise people to submit to the festivals that require a world premiere first because you can always submit to the other festivals later. Likewise, there are festivals that require a country or regional kind of premiere status. A U.S. premiere is the first time the film screens publicly in the U.S., and a New York City premiere means it's the first time the film is screened in NYC, and so forth. My consulting client continued, "A Chicago festival that runs in mid-October is where I want to be the official premiere of my short film, but an LA film festival that I also want to submit to is hosting their event during the first week of October, and their notifications of acceptances, rejections are released 2 months before the Chicago notifications. If I get into both festivals, can I still designate the Chicago one as a world premiere even if I already screened it in LA a few days prior? Also, does any of this premiere lingo, world, US, international, regional, LA, New York, East Coast, West Coast, Midwest, etc., used at festivals to distinguish one premiere from another premiere really matter? I always suggest entering as many festivals as you can. Sometimes one is limited by funding. If you entered all of them, you'll spend tens of thousands on submission fees. If you get accepted into 2 or more festivals that each require a world premiere, you can always have the option to decline being in the less desirable one. In this case, I suggested if she gets into both the LA and Chicago fests, to screen in both. I don't see the trouble in saying your world premiere is in Chicago, especially if the LA screening date was just within a few days of the Chicago date. The use of the word premiere via film festivals themselves is meant to promote the festival itself. If they can tell their regional newspapers that they have movies that have never before been seen in St. Louis, for example, then the festival might draw more of a crowd. A message like that sends the signal to come see it because they may not get another chance. When my movie Casserole Club got into Raindance, we had to promise it would be a UK premiere, but they didn't care whether or not the film previously screened in the US, etc. When it came time to see if we could get into the Berlinale, Berlin said we couldn't be considered because we'd already screened at Raindance. They wanted a world premiere, or at least a European premiere. Now, had I been accepted to both Raindance and Berlinale, and had their dates been closer, I might not even mention Raindance, and if Berlin found out, I could have told Berlin that the Raindance screening was an unfinished test screening or sneak peek, and that the finished movie would premiere at Berlin for the first time, making it a world premiere. I haven't tried that kind of scenario yet, so I'm not sure if it would even work, but it seems plausible to me, and Berlin might buy that. Lastly, I think any premiere lingo is really about marketing, and festivals just want to make sure they have ticket-buying customers. A chair is a chair is a chair. Have you ever heard someone comment, "My God, that's a bad chair"? I doubt it, as there really is no such thing as a bad chair or a good chair. There are simply different levels of craftsmanship involved in making a chair, and of course, a variety of finishing techniques and overall aesthetics. Some chairs are spit out on an assembly line by the thousands, while other chairs are made by hand. Some chairs have cushions, some have armrests, and others even have accessories, i.e., little cup holders, rocking abilities, footrests, etc. In any case, it remains a chair, the purpose of which is to be sat upon. The people who sit on chairs all share the same activity. They sit. Sure, some people have poor posture, but in general, I can't see how someone could be a good sitter or a bad sitter. Never do people go to a dinner party and loudly complain, "Francis, look at the way you're sitting in that chair. It's bad, just awful." In fact, it makes me wonder how exactly could Francis be sitting badly? His rear end is fixated on the seat. Both feet are on the floor. Sure, he's got a bad back, which makes him lean a little to the left, but nevertheless, Francis is sitting in the chair. The only way from my point of view Francis could fail in his sitting is if he weren't sitting at all. It would seem to me that only when one stands is it appropriate to attack their ability or talent to sit. "Francis, you're not sitting." Perhaps those few people who, in their attempt to sit, miss the chair completely and plummet to the floor, are guilty of poor sitting. But the indignity of missing the chair would seem to be punishment enough without adding insult to injury by bringing their failure to their attention. Like the people who fail to sit in chairs, I believe it's only acceptable to attack an actor when he or she has failed to appear in a film. Michelle Pfeiffer, for instance, is bad for failing to appear in The Silence of the Lambs. Likewise, so are Whoopi Goldberg, Demi Moore, Madonna, Nicole Kidman, Reese Witherspoon, and all the other actresses who didn't appear in that film. Shame on them. Don't get me wrong. Some actors look great in any movie, while others do not. Jodie Foster, for instance, looks equally as great sitting on a plush sofa from Eddie Bauer as she does swiveling on an Eames with matching black leather ottoman. Other people, like the late Marlon Brando in his elder years, for instance, aren't necessarily the most elegant of sitters. There are some people, without a doubt, that should avoid sitting on certain chairs, but that is all about looks, not general sitting ability. Movies, it can be argued, like chairs, are not good or bad. They simply have different levels of craftsmanship. What's the difference in how Thomasville, Broyhill, or Ethan Allen chairs are made? Very little that I can see. Sure, the shapes and textures differ, but they seem to be built in the same fashion. Much like the films made by committee, they seem safely appealing to most, and I agree, manufactured with skill. Read, they aren't going to fall apart. Ron Howard's movies are like these. So are Martin Scorsese's, for that matter. There is nothing more or less exceptional about either. Some chairs, like those sold at Pottery Barn or Crate and Barrel, are constructed with equal skill but have aesthetics and prices that appeal to a different buyer. Clint Eastwood reminds me of Eddie Bauer. Marketing and selling a motion picture is just like marketing and selling furniture. Pottery Barn needs to sell thousands, if not millions, where Eames is happy to sell a few hundred. Blair Witch, while poorly made, still sold millions. That movie in particular is just like furniture sold at Walmart. And in retrospect, the people who buy furniture at Walmart are probably not going to buy an Eames. And like an Eames, Eyes Wide Shut, while one of the best crafted motion pictures ever made, didn't appeal to the masses. Within all of these examples lies genre. The genre of world market furniture, read often made with cheap components, tend to fall apart a lot sooner than, say, a Broyhill nightstand, which has the solid construction of a Bergman film. You can tell what kinds of films people like by taking a look around their living room. What kinds of furniture do they have? Do they prefer to sit upon a chair made of plastic, mesh, wood, or steel? Do they sleep on an airbed or atop of the line Sealy? Where do they eat dinner? On the floor? On the sofa? Or at a solid oak dining table? On my street, we understand movies are like pieces of furniture. We know what separates a Restoration Hardware from an IKEA. We acknowledge there are similarities and differences, but whether it's manufactured by the thousands or made one at a time, the bottom line is, it's only a movie. Tune in next time for more Filmmaking Confidential. It is totally free to subscribe, and when you subscribe, you'll get upcoming new episodes automatically, and you'll have free access to all our past shows. Please leave a review to let us know how we're doing. The Filmmaking Confidential podcast is a production of Dakanga Audio and produced by myself and Ella Spencer. Our theme music is composed by Kevin Robles. For more of the Filmmaking Confidential podcast, head over to filmmakingconfidential.com. While you wait for Season 2, have a listen to some of the episodes from Season 1. The stories shared by each guest are often funny, honest, candid, and extremely inspiring. Production of Season 2 is in the works. To learn more of my filmmaking secrets, be sure to pick up a copy of the book, Filmmaking Confidential. Available on Audible, paperback, and ebook, wherever books are sold. I'm Steve Balderson. Thanks for listening and spreading the word. Until next time, keep making, keep doing, keep going.